Well, I certainly didn't invest in crypto. I'm proud of the fact I've avoided it. It's like, some venereal disease or something. I just regard it as beneath contempt. Some people think it's modernity, and they welcome a currency that's so useful in extortions and kidnappings and so on, tax evasion. I wish it had been banned immediately, and I admire the Chinese for banning it. I think they were right, and we've been wrong to allow it.
Po nama, Charlie Munger nije u pravu, što dokazuje napredak Bitcoina i drugih kriptovaluta već godinama. Bitcoin i kriptovalute imaju svoju vrednost iz više razloga. Prvi, jer potražnja premašuje ponudu. Takođe, mnogi investitori veruju da kripto ima potencijal da bude korisniji od fiat valuta, jer je decentralizovan i ne bi bio podložan inflaciji kao i drugim vladinim ili političkim pritiscima. Intrizična vrednost Bitcoina daleko prevazilazi njegovu vrednost robe. Ono što stvara njegovu stvarnu vrednost je matematička garancija da se Bitcoin ekosistem ne može zasnivati na sili, za razliku od fiat novca. To je zbog kriptografije na kojoj je Bitcoin izgrađen. U svakom slučaju, u ovom videu treba da čujete mišljenje jednog od najstarijih i najbogatijih investitora, Charlie'a Mungera. Ukoliko želite da uđete u svet kriptotrgovanja i investiranja, jedna od menjačnica koju tim naše akademije često koristi jeste PRIMEXBT. Kako biste ostvarili popust prilikom otvaranja naloga, kao i mnoge druge beneficije, proverite linkove u opisu ovog videa i postanite jedan od preko 1 milion registrovanih korisnika na ovoj platformi.
Well, certainly great short squeeze in GameStop was wretched excess. Certainly the Bitcoin thing is wretched excess. I would argue that venture capital is throwing too much money too fast and there's a considerable wretched excess in venture capital and other forms of private equity. And so we have a stock market which some people use like a gambling parlor. And the transactions of the people who love the gambling parlor aspect of the business and those who want to make long-term investments to take care of their old age and so forth. I mean, you muddle it in one market and it goes out of control because the stock market becomes an ideal gambling parlor activity. I don't think that ought to have been allowed either. If I were the dictator of the world, I would have some kind of a tax on short-term gains that made the stock market very much less liquid and drove out this marriage of gambling parlor and legitimate capital development of the country. It's not a good marriage, and I think we need a divorce.
How would a divorce work?
Well, you'd have to have some kind of a rule that just made stocks way less liquid. We have all the real estate we want, all the shopping centers and auto agencies and so forth, without having a perfect liquid market. We would have a stock market that was way less liquid. When I was young, we had a stock market that was way less liquid, way fewer shares. When I was at the Harvard Law School, we seldom traded 1 million shares in a day. Now we trade billions. We don't need a stock market that liquid. What we're getting is wretched excess and danger for the country. And everybody loves it because it's like a bunch of people get drunk at a party. They're having so much fun getting drunk that they don't think about the consequences. It has bad consequences. You can argue that the wretched excesses of the 20s gave us the Great Depression, and the Great Depression gave us Hitler.
Our old school Ben Graham valuation methods dead?
They'll never die. You can't. The idea of getting more value than you pay for, that's what investment is. If you want to be successful, you have to get more value than you pay for. And so it's never going to be obsolete. Now, you can get a whole body of people that don't even know what they're buying. They're just quotations on the ticker. Well, I certainly didn't invest in crypto. I'm proud of the fact I've avoided it. It's like, some venereal disease or something. I just regard it as beneath contempt. Some people think it's modernity, and they welcome a currency that's so useful in extortions and kidnappings and so on and so on, tax evasion. I wish it had been banned immediately. And I admire the Chinese for banning it. I think they were right and we've been wrong to allow it. Think of the past crazy booms and how they worked out. The South Seas bubble, the bubble in the late 20s, so on and so on. We've had this since the dawn of capitalism. We've had crazy bubbles.
Do you think that we will ever see small businesses have a more even playing field, or is this a never-ending spiral down the rabbit hole until there's nothing but big business left?
Well, I think we will have small business as far ahead as you can see. And if you stop to think about it, every shopping center is full of small business. And now they're not as flourishing as they were a while ago, but we're not going to get rid of small business in the United States. In a sense, we need a big business. It makes sense to have something like Apple and Google as big as they are and serving as well as they're doing. And just as I didn't mind AT&T when it ran the whole television network, I don't mind Apple or Google being a big company. So I'm not worried about having some big companies and a lot of small ones. I think that's our system.
You think it's an uneven playing field right now? The Russell 2000 is more than 15% off its all-time high right now. It's had a pretty rough go, especially in recent months. Well,
if you stop to think about it, my way in life was not predicting little short-term differences between the Russell index and the Standard & Poor's index. I don't have any opinion about which index is better at any given time. I never even think about it. I'm always just looking for something that's good enough to put Munger money in, or Berkshire money in, or Daily Journal money in. And I figure that I want to swim as well as I can against the tides. I'm not trying to predict the tides. Well, if you're going to invest in stocks for the long term or real estate, of course there are going to be periods when there's a lot of agony and other periods when there's a boom. And I think you just have to learn to live through them. As Kipling said, treat those two imposters just the same. You have to deal with daylight and night. Does that bother you very much? No. Sometimes it's night and sometimes it's daylight. Sometimes it's a boom, sometimes it's a bust. I believe in doing as well as you can and keep going as long as they let you.
Do the great tech franchises of our day, specifically Microsoft, Apple, and Alphabet, have the same long-term durability that Coca-Cola had 30 to 40 years ago?
Well, of course, it's a lot easier to predict who flourished in the past because we know what happened in the past. But I want to compare what's going to happen in the future. Of course, that's harder. It's very hard for me to imagine. It doesn't mean it couldn't happen, but I would expect Microsoft and Apple and Alphabet to be strong 50 years from now. Really strong, still strong. If you'd asked me when I was young what was going to happen to the department stores that went broke, the newspapers which went broke, and so on and so on, I wouldn't have predicted that either. So I think it's hard to predict how your world is going to change if you're going to talk about 70, 80, 90 years. Just imagine they wiped out the shareholders of General Motors, they wiped out the shareholders of Kodak. Who in the hell would have predicted that? This technological change can destroy a lot of people, and I think it's hard to predict for sure in advance. But the telephone company is still with us. It just uses a different way of doing it. So some things remain and some vanish.
What makes you optimistic?
Well, you have to be optimistic about the competency of our technical civilization. But there again, it's an interesting thing. If you take the last 100 years, 1922 to 2022, most of modernity came in that 100 years. And in the previous 100 years, that got another big chunk of modernity. And before that, things were pretty much the same for the previous thousands of years. Life was pretty brutal and short and limited and what have you. No printing press, no air conditioning, no modern medicine, And what happens is, it's really interesting, is with all this enormous increase in living standards and freedom and diminishment of racial inequities and all the huge progress that has come. People are less happy about the state of affairs than they were when things were way tougher. And that has a very simple explanation. The world is not driven by greed, it's driven by envy. And so the fact that everybody's 5 times better off than they used to be, they take it for granted. All they think about is somebody else has having more now, and it's not fair that he should have it and they don't.
I'm extremely happy and content. What's your secret to lead a happy life?
Well, I always say the same thing. Realistic expectations, which is low expectations. If you have unreasonable demands on life, you're like a bird that's trying to destroy himself by bashing his wings on the edge of the cage, and you really can't get out of the cage. It's stupid. You want to have reasonable expectations and take life's results, good and bad as they happen, with a certain amount of stoicism. There'll never be any shortage of good people in the world. All you got to do is think them out and get as many of them as possible into your life and keep the rest of the hell out.